So the Bhagavatam is here. I was looking for a book with a jacket.
Oh, she took it off, that's right.
When I saw this, I thought it was from Srila Prabhupada's letters or something. Okay, so we're on the 13th of, it's the very first chapter. The title of the canto is The Status Quo.
I don't know if that's 9 or 4.
It's 9.
Okay.
It's supposed to be 9. I'm pretty sure it's what you put up there. Okay. Yada cha Partha Parita Sabayam Yada cha Partha Parita Sabayam Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna Jagaguru Yani Jagada Krishna
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Nathani
Nathani
Pumsam
Amritam
Yanani
Yanani
Nathani Pumsam Amrita Yanani
Nathani Pumsam Amrita Yanani Rajoru Mene
Shita Punya
Lesaha
Rajoru Mene Shita Punya Lesaha
Rajoru Mene Shata Punya Lesaha
Yada cha pata pita sabayam
Yadacha Partha Prahita Sabayam
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishnaha
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Natani Pumsam Amritayanani
Natandi Pumsam Amritayanani
Rajoru Mene Shita Punya Lesa
Rajoru Mene Shata Punya Lesaha
Yada Chapata Paita Sabhavyam
Yadacha Partha Prahita Sabayam
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishnaha
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishnaha
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Tatani Pumsam Amritayani
Rajoru Mene Shita Punya Lesaha
Rajoru Mene Shata Punya Lesaha
Yada Chapata Paita Sabhavyam
Yadacha Partha Prahita Sabayam
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishnaha
Jagada
Yani Jagata Krishna
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Rajoru Mene Shita Punya Lesaha
Rajo Mene Shata Punya Lesaha Yadacha Partha Prahita Sabayam
Yada Chapata Paita Sabhayam
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishnaha
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Rajoru Mene Shata Punya Lesaha
Rajoru Mene Shita Punya Lesaha
Yada Chapata Prahita Sabayam
Yada Chapata Praita Sabayam
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Rajoru Mene Shata Punya Lesaha
Rajoru Mene Shata Punya Lesaha
Yadacha Partha Prahita Sabayam
Yada Chapata Paita Sabayam
Yani Jagata Krishna
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishnaha
Nani Samamritayanani
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Rasurunani Krishna Punna Leshaha
Rajuru Mene Shita Punya Lesaha
He'll be okay. She sees a little lizard.
Are you-
What is a lizard?
Yeah, he's right there.
Oh,
Hare Krishna.
Yada Chakara Partha Prahita Sabhayam
Yada Chapata Prahita Sabayam
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna
Nathani Pumsam Amritayanani
Natani pumsam amritayanani.
Rajorurmine shata punya leshaha.
Rajoruname
Neshwata
Neshapunyalishaha.
Yeah, there was one in here when I was chanting yesterday. I get those, what are those? They look like sticks, little bugs.
Praying mantises?
I get those all the time in my house. They freak me out.
They kill every bug.
Yeah, I don't mess with them. I just let them do their thing. They kind of scare me. They just look weird.
Oh, I love those. Send them to my house.
Hey,
Okay. Anyone else want
If
to
I
do
had
it?
a jar, I'd take that lizard.
you want to chant what to do?
Yada chapatha krita svanjam.
Yada chapata kaita sabhayam.
Jagda jagat guru yani jagda krishna.
Jaga Guru Yani Jagada Krishna.
Natani puspam amritayanani.
Natani Pumsam Amritayanani.
Varo manu pastapanya krishna.
Rajorumene Shitapunya Lesaha. Okay, word for word here. Yada. When. Cha. Also. Patapahita. Being advised by Arjuna. Sabayam. In the assembly. Jagat Guruhu. Of the teacher of the world. Yani. Whose? Those, excuse me. Those. Jagada. When? Krishna. Lord Krishna. Na. Never. Tani. Such words. Pumsam. Of all men of sense. Amrita ayanani. As good as nectar. Raja. The king. In parentheses. Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana. Uru. Very important. Mene. Did consider. Shita. Dwindling. Punya. Nilesaha. Fragment of pious acts. Translation, please repeat. Lord Krishna was sent by Arjuna into the assembly. Is the spiritual master of the whole world. And although his words were heard by some, like Bhishma, his pure nectar, it was not so for the others, who were completely bereft of the last furthing of pious works, of past pious works. The king, Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana, did not take the words of Lord Krishna very seriously. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport. Lord Krishna, who is the spiritual master of the entire universe, accepted the duty of a messenger and, deputed by Arjuna, went to the assembly of King Dhritarashtra on a peace mission. Krishna is everyone's Lord, yet because he was the transcendental friend of Arjuna, he gladly accepted the role of a messenger, exactly like an ordinary friend. That is the beauty of the Lord's behavior with his pure devotees. He reached the assembly and spoke about peace, and the message was relished by Bhishma and other great leaders, because it was spoken by the Lord himself. But due to the exhaustion of the pious results of his past deeds, Duryodhana or his father, Dhritarashtra, did not take the message very seriously. That is the way of persons who have no credit of pious deeds. By past pious deeds, one may become the king of a country, but because the results of the pious acts of Duryodhana and company were dwindling, it became evident from their actions that they were sure to lose the kingdom to the Pandavas. The message of Godhead is always like nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite to the non-devotees. Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice. Translation again. Lord Krishna was sent by Arjuna into the assembly as the spiritual master of the whole world. And although his words were heard by some, like Bhishma, his pure nectar, it was not so for the others, who were completely bereft of the last birthing of pious works. The king, Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana, did not take the words of Lord Krishna very seriously. Om Gananandasha Gananjana Shilakaya Kakshun Militam Yena Tadmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Yadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Parkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakam Vitam Cha He Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Chigapate Gopesa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchan Nagurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eswari Brishabhanu Stitu Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpya Trudhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitam Nam Vamanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. By unimaginable good fortune, most of the world, but especially his disciples, were benedicted by Srila Prabhupada to enter into the divine Leela of Lord Krishna and Srimad Mahaprabhu. So, this Leela, of course, Srila Prabhupada described in his Krishna book and in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he wanted us to, if he was given the time, to give us the Mahabharata, where is more elaborately, these pastimes that we're reading about today are more elaborately spoken. So, by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, were fortunate enough to become aware of these divine leelas and to be able to hear them and receive the purifying vibrations which cleanse the heart of all dirty things, especially misconception of impersonalism and voidism, but materialism as well, and simply tremendous amount of lack in faith in the divine Leela of the Lord. So in this particular Leela, everybody knows the story, how Yudhisthira was cheated out of the kingdom and was sent to the forest so people would forget him while Duryodhana ruled the world. It wasn't that the vast amount of people would notice a tremendous difference in the governance of the state, because Duryodhana was an able administrator, quite capable of performing those duties. And he was also able to keep any criminals or powerful foreign forces from taking over the empire. He had some of the most powerful persons in the universe. His commander-in-chief and chief protector in the form of Bhishma and Dronacharya, and ever great heroes equivalent to the Pandavas themselves, such as Karna, the son of the sun god, also from the royal queen Kunti, wife of Pandu. So, Duryodhana was able to do a good job, but it wasn't his. It didn't really belong to him. He gained it by cheating, which, some Kshatriyas may, take that as, however you can achieve victory. Others are much more honorable, like Bhishma Dev was an epitome of following the law and order according to the letter. Whereas, what I gather in my reading is Duryodhana had more of a mentality of a Kshatriya, not giving up, fighting to the end, and victory at all costs. And he plotted, practically speaking, from the time his cousins came to the city of Hastinapur, because in their youth, I would, probably something like 10 or 12 years old, they came to Hastinapur from the forest. Their father was cursed, that as soon as he would attempt to have offspring, he would die. And so he lived as a renunciate in the forest so that, there wouldn't be so much temptation. He wouldn't be surrounded by beautiful princesses and queens and stately affairs and all sorts of times when he would have to exert his prowess and people would honor and glorify him, and there would be a natural tendency towards creating offspring to maintain the kingdom. So while he was gone, Bhishma was made sure things went on properly, but his older brother, who was blind, Duryodhana, was placed upon the throne. But he had Bhishma and Dronacharya and his younger brother Vidura, all there to advise him and help him. But Duryodhana grew up thinking that he would be the regent, or the person who would be coronated as king next. And he had 99 brothers, powerful brothers, to assist him. And all of a sudden, Pandu dies, and the sages bring his mother and her 5 sons home to Hastinapur to be taken care of by the family. This is their ancestral home. This is their home. Bhishma is their grandfather also. And, Vidura and Dhritarashtra are their uncles. And Duryodhana is the cousin. But by Providence's will, Yudhisthira is older than Duryodhana. And he's actually next in line for the throne. It was his father who was placed upon the throne because the father was highly qualified. There were no health defects. And his father was the king, although Dhritarashtra was ruling in his absence because he was in the forest performing austerities. So Duryodhana from day one, began to consider how to eliminate his enemies. This is quite common in Kshatriya affairs, especially in Kali Yuga. You go down the list of kings who killed their brothers and other competitors or persons in line for the throne. They would simply murder them, get rid of them, fight with them fairly. But in any case, they would eliminate them, or the person would have had to be, highly submissive to them, that they trusted them as a loyal ally. This, especially in Kali Yuga, goes on. We have the example of Lord Ram and how loyal Lakshman was, but even Lakshman doubted the intentions of Bharat, and Bharat being next in line to Ram for the throne, and the throne being given to him by his mother by utilizing a boon or a blessing she had from her husband to send Ram to the forest and place Bharat on the throne. So Lakshman didn't trust Bharat's intentions. He thought he's just after the throne. And there's so many instances of that throughout ancient Vedic history, modern Indian history, and modern world history, and every government where they eliminate their competitors to rule without any what they would consider no past. The whole reason Kamsa wanted to kill Krishna because it was predicted that Krishna would kill him. He was king now. He had usurped the kingdom from his father and put him in jail. And now he didn't trust his sister's son, it was prophesied, that he would come and take the throne from him. So he went through all sorts of dishonorable activity to keep that throne. So the same here, the Yodin, thinking like these power-hungry Kshatriyas think, he had to think about how to eliminate Yudhisthira as a competitor. He felt that he could compete with Yudhisthira in the battlefield. Yudhisthira was a head and a shoulder above him when it came to implementing justice and treating all the citizens and people extremely fair. In the Yodin's mind, right or might was right. If the Kshatriya had the might, then that equated to righteousness for him. Whereas Yudhisthira was the opposite. For him, righteousness was might. Truthfulness was right. Not just having the power to take something. So initially he wanted to eliminate Bhima. He hated Bhima because Bhima was so strong he could fight with him and all of his brothers put together. He saw Bhima as Yudhisthira's protector. Later he saw Arjuna in that position. So, how to eliminate them, he cheated them out of the kingdom by gambling, utilizing his very dear uncle who completely supported him. More politics from Sukuni, who was practically a manifestation of Kali Yuga, how to cheat people. He was, from his previous lives, he was an expert at gambling, and he possessed dice that would obey his very command, made from the bones of his father. And Yudhisthira, fell into the trap. Being a Kshatriya, he could not walk away from the challenge. So when challenged to gamble, he accepted the match. But immediately Duryodhana pulled some strings and had his uncle play on his behalf. Yudhisthira maybe could have did something else. I don't think he could have found anybody else at that time and that to play on his behalf who was an equal to Sukuni. So he had to meet the challenge himself. And naturally he lost, and he lost everything. And even his wife was disgraced in the whole match. And disgraced to the extent that ill omens began to manifest, and Krishna had to work some mystic wonders that started to change the frame of mind of the king, Dhritarashtra. And so Dhritarashtra, seeing all these ill manifestations, decided that the Pandavas were treated so badly that he would have to make amends. So he gave them everything back and asked them to please be forgiven and sent them on their way. But again, Duryodhana comes to him and whines and sings the blues so nicely and moves the emotion in his heart, because this is his eldest son, and he could turn the kingdom over to him, and he's not blind, and so he's always been able to get his father to decide whatever he wanted, just by the affection of his heart. So he gets his father to call the Pandavas back, that there would be unnecessary competition. Already previously the kingdom was divided unfairly between Yudhisthira and Duryodhana. So Yudhisthira was ruling half the kingdom, and it flourished. He became the emperor of the whole world. He performed the biggest sacrifice to be given this title. And Duryodhana was completely envious of all that. And so now Duryodhana was really upset that he had won it, but his father gave it back. And so he convinced his father to bring Yudhisthira back, because we need to resolve this. Because there was, there's going to be competition between the cousin brothers. So let's have one more match. Whoever wins, wins. They rule the kingdom. And the other is sent away to the forest for 12 years to live as a renunciate. And in the 13th year to live incognito somewhere in the world. And if discovered during that year, then they would have to spend 13 more years in the forest. So Yudhisthira somehow ever did it again. He was challenged. His uncle, his dear uncle, his grandfather wasn't saying anything. His martial arts teacher wasn't saying anything. They didn't. Vidura tried to warn him. He tried to tell Dhritarashtra, don't do these things. And Duryodhana considered his uncle Vidura even a bigger enemy than Yudhisthira practically. Although there was nothing Vidura could do. He either had to obey or leave. So they gambled again, and Yudhisthira lost and was sent off to the forest. He managed to stay there for 12 years. During that time, Arjuna went to the heavenly planets and gained all the celestial weapons and came back. He was ready for battle. Bhima got the blessings of Hanuman. Hanuman agreed to appear on the flag of Arjuna. And they were ready to ask for their kingdom back. They simply had to get through the year of being not found by the Kauravas. And they managed to do that. They managed to do that. And even in the end, just a day or so after it passed, the Kauravas discovered them and attacked that particular kingdom to force them to come out of hiding. And they did. Arjuna beat all of them. And Duryodhana thought that he had exposed them, but he was wrong in his thinking of the calendar. And Bhishma agreed with Arjuna that actually the time span had passed. And so now Duryodhana began to bring about all of his allies, and he was able to make an alliance with many, many powerful Kshatriyas throughout the world. Even the uncle of the Pandavas, the grandfather of Sahadev and his brother, the king of Madras, Salya. So he had all these people on his side. He had 13 Aksahini divisions, and Yudhisthira only managed to get 7. And of course, he had Krishna. Duryodhana was quite satisfied, though. Him and Arjuna both went to get Krishna's help, and Duryodhana even got there first. It's a famous story, but because Krishna saw Arjuna first, he let him choose first. But he gave both parties an equal opportunity. He let even himself, he could be chosen, and he would simply be like an advisor. He wouldn't fight in the war. Or they could take his entire personal army of Vaikuntha warriors who could never defeat it. And so Arjuna chose Krishna, and Duryodhana was happy to take that army. So Duryodhana even possessed Krishna's personal army. And so now that the war was ready, but Yudhisthira, he's thinking, this is terrible. Things should be settled through diplomacy and negotiation, and war. People will be killed, families will be destroyed. Practically speaking, ladies will be left husbandless, children will be left fatherless. We have to do something about this. So here he sends Krishna himself on his behalf to go and make peace. If anybody can make peace, it's Krishna. So Krishna goes as a messenger of peace, trying to bring about peace. But as the text describes, it was heard like nectar by the pure devotees that were there. But for Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, they simply could not appreciate it. And Duryodhana made it very clear to Krishna that he was not going to give the Pandavas anything. They even were willing to let him remain the king, just give them some villages to rule, because that's their duty. They have to govern. They have to be, a governor or a president or a king or, a mayor of a. They have to be in charge of some place. That's their job. So, but Duryodhana wouldn't give him anything. Not a thing. The famous quote is, "I will not give you enough land to place a pin in." So war was inevitable. They even tried to capture Krishna and put him in jail. That failed. Duryodhana was just being so arrogant and feeling so puffed up that there was no way that the Pandavas could win. Krishna was there just as an advisor. Their strength was with Bhima. They had some ever-powerful warriors such as Draupadi's father and such as the king of the land where they spent their year and when they were in hiding. They also had Krishna's commander-in-chief, though. Probably Duryodhana underestimated Satyaki. Satyaki was equivalent to Arjuna. He was practically infallible on a battlefield. So in many ways it was evenly matched, but in many ways it wasn't, because Bhishma couldn't be killed. He could only die when he wanted to die. Dronacharya, there was no one to compete with him. he could kill them all. He was their martial guru. And there were many other powerful warriors on the side of the Yogindra. And plus his army was much bigger. So he was very confident. And so, unfortunately, Krishna failed in his peace mission. Prabhupada makes the point that the non-devotees, they can never appreciate the nectar of these stories. They just take them as stories. And so they can't really accept it as Shastra, unfortunately. Books that contain the word of God and the absolute truth that are meant to be used for governing the world, meant to be used for governing our lives. The philosophy of the self, of the soul, and our spiritual destination. They unfortunately won't take these things seriously because they're suffering from the bodily conception of life. Srila Prabhupada came to destroy that. He didn't come, just as, like you see many many devotees who will take these things very emotionally. They'll recite these things and they'll display their emotions, for their affection for Krishna, and they may, cry, and they may be able to sing the verses very nicely. Srila Prabhupada, he put more of an emphasis on the philosophy of the self and the science of the soul, and understanding that foremost, and never, generally speaking, practically all the time, he spoke as a scholar with the emphasis on that subject matter, the science of the self, and not just being able to sing the verses with a lot of bhav or emotion, and to display these feelings, and to simply recite these stories, for people who have affection for them. It wasn't, Prabhupada had to free the world from this disease that we're suffering from, that makes the pastimes of the Lord bitter to such envious people who are envious that God or Krishna can live such a life. Prabhupada had to destroy their bodily conception of life so they could understand themselves as an eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of God, meant to live in a loving relationship with Him. He had to argue and defeat the arguments of his opponents, and establish Krishna consciousness on a philosophical basis. In a language that was not his native language. He had to do that in the English language. Not just Bengali or Hindi. There were, I'm sure, other people that were ever Gaudiya Vaishnavas, disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta, who were also doing that in those languages, but Prabhupada had to do it in the English language, which made it perhaps even tougher. He had to understand all these words. It had to be perfectly understood. And he was successful in doing that. Such a great feat, such a great mission. So, here we are today. We're able to hear these pastimes and have appreciation how Krishna can take such a role as simply the chariot driver of his friend, who was one of the principal warriors on the side of the Pandavas, the protector of his elder brother, Yudhisthira. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply going to play the role of his chariot driver, and he's going to act as a messenger to try to establish peace, like a diplomat. Many times they would send a Brahmin to do such work like that. For, because of, a Brahmin can remain gentle and non-threatening, and can very intelligently make different proposals to negotiate an agreement. But Krishna was chosen to do this. And even, he failed in the face of complete envy. Although Duryodhana attained a heavenly kingdom because of dying on the battlefield, neither he or his father could enter into Krishna's eternal Leela because of their envy. Dhritarashtra practiced the Ashtanga Yoga and left his body in a mystic fire. But he could only attain to the Brahman. He couldn't attain to the eternal Leela of the Lord because of their envy of Krishna's eternal devotees, the Pandavas. That was their great misfortune. Anyhow, it's a little bit after 8. Do we have any comments or questions about all this?
I have a lot. Can I ask something?
Sure, go ahead.
The
We're going
first
to
thing
stop
that
at 10
came to
after
mind
8, so I'll try to keep it
So
concise.
there's a lesson here because they had actually equal capabilities, you pointed out, they all had capabilities, and is it the devotional character seems to be the most important thing? Is that what the lesson is here?
Yeah, what good is it if we're so materially qualified, but we lack devotion to the absolute truth, especially to the Supreme Personality of God. There's that verse in the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto that, what good is it if we can perform our work successfully, but if we cannot remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead? We're just engaged in karma. Another example of that is King Nriga, how he was so pious that you couldn't count the amount of pious results that he would attain. But there was just that one little impious thing there due to an unfortunate, unintentional mistake. And, he would have to suffer some consequences for that. And Yamaraj asked him, do you want to suffer that first, or do you want to enjoy your practically unlimited pious results? So he chose to first experience the impious result. Then later he would be able to enjoy without worrying about that. And so, he took birth as a lizard. And so the lesson to learn is that in the world of fruited work, there's always the possibility of a mistake that, we'll have to suffer for. So in the world of fruited work, we gain great blessings, but then eventually they come to an end. Just like it says in this purport, that the Yodin became a king because of his past pious activities. He was given such a post. But now the results of those pious activities were running out. And anyone who could see with the vision of eternity could see that, he was going to lose. Even though you would maybe not be able to make that judgment from a material point of view, those who would see things spiritually, they would see that he's offending Krishna, he's already offended Yudhisthira, he's all of his pious results are coming to an end, and he will lose this war. Does that help any?
Oh, yeah. But is it all right if I ask something else? Or do you believe that?
Yeah, I just had one point. I like one of the points from there. So you spoke about a lot of professional speakers, Bhagavatam speakers who speak so nicely, quote nice quote verses, Sufabri language, so everybody will be mesmerized. But Prabhupada did not do that. He could have done that, but he did not do that. He took the path of speaking, path of freeing the world instead of trying to promote himself as a good speaker and very a great holy man. So that's very special about Srila Prabhupada. So it was very clear what his Guru wanted, and he exactly did exactly the same thing. He did not get confused or not carried away by different other ideas like others usually get carried. So I see this same trend is also in ISKCON. So people, sometimes speak more like professional speakers, and but as followers of Prabhupada and as followers of Srila Prabhupada, we should definitely adopt his style to a good extent. You can speak nicely, you can very beautifully speak, but ultimately you should reiterate on the same point that Prabhupada spoke, quote the same examples, speak what he spoke. So that's the style should be adopted as a disciple. So that's very important. Carry forward the same mood and carry forward the same style.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think Prabhupada's main criticism of the professional Bhagavatam speakers was that they would utilize the money just for their livelihood. And he didn't see that they were transforming the world. There's a congregation in India, people that love the Lord and His pastimes, and so they would just take advantage of that and just speak to those who are already familiar, and in that way earn a livelihood without sacrificing that money for the mission of saving the world. Srila Prabhupada also has, disciples who are, very devoted, and, disciples and disciples of his disciples who are very devoted and very excellent chanters of verses and speakers on the science of the absolute truth. One to note was Radha Govinda Maharaj. He would even come to Louisiana. Baton Rouge, he came here a couple of times too, but besides giving a Bhagavatam class, they really couldn't gather an assembly of people. But in Baton Rouge and in New Orleans, he would gather an assembly of people and have a week-long, 2-week-long Bhagavatam recitation. But unique to him is that I never saw him go directly to the 10th canto and especially speak on the Rasa Leela for the intriguement of all the ladies and gentlemen. He would, I remember him specifically speaking from the first canto and the second canto of the Bhagavatam. And he was able to get more out of people in Baton Rouge than what we were able to get. Our temple in Talavana, our temple in New Orleans, and people who would help a little bit. They were more intrigued with him and helped him more, so to speak. So we also able to utilize that Shakti, so to speak, that energy to bring people to Krishna consciousness. We're also able to, we've been, in fact, and during the pandemic, we've been forced to do this over the internet, and from a distance from people utilizing that medium where they can see and hear you, and they can listen to you. So we've been, forced to do these things too, utilizing the YouTube channels and the Zoom app and various other ways people are able to present themselves. And it's not that we're in competition just for dollars and cents and just for making followers, but in another sense we're in competition for trying to save the world and help people to be Krishna conscious. And those other things just come along with it. You know, we'll collect enough money to build the temple of Vedic planetarium like Prabhupada wanted. You know, we'll collect enough money to continue to print books and distribute them, or to produce these things in other ways to get it to people. You know, devotees are, you know, we're in that world of ministry, in that world of presenting knowledge. You know, devotees are, you know, we have to do that despite the fact that there are millions and great powerful scholars throughout the world who are all also vying for people's attention. And, you know, there's unlimited TED Talks and this talk and that type of thing. This talk show radio host to make their living, you know, presenting things to the public. And, you know, ISKCON is also out there trying to lead the public on the path back home, back to Godhead, and to learn to live. Again, just like Krishna went there to make peace, we're also trying to make peace in the world. Learn to live more peacefully and happily with a spiritual concept of life. I mean, that's a very hard thing to establish in a world where they consider a fruited plain of enjoyment. You know, they're all competing for the resources. They want to either maintain their sovereignty or they want to gain sovereignty, and, you know, from the political presentations. And with this, you know, with to speak of all the other various types of presentations, economic and just strictly sense gratification, gross sense gratification, or just learning, mundane learning, or even just spiritual learning, you know, presenting the absolute truth from other perspectives. So, you know, ISKCON is doing, in my opinion, you know, my humble opinion, a fairly decent job. There's always, you know, we always have to get stronger and better at our presentation, and at the same time keep it pure and not just become power hungry for followers and money. But you know, that's our job. Just like Arjuna had to go out and fight a war as a Kshatriya, you know, we had to go out and present the absolute truth in a logical and influential way, a charismatic way that will lead people on the right path. And, you know, if we can't do that, then they are going to be led another way, and we won't have the same qualifications of Srila Prabhupada as a leader. You know, we have to, our whole movement is nothing but leaders from beginning from Mahaprabhu. But we can't lead the people back home, back to Godhead. Then, in one sense, you know, we failed. At least we can try, but maybe we fail, and that will be to our credit. But, you know, like Arjuna, you know, we have that faith in Guru and Krishna, Guru and Gauranga, and do our best, and be able to utilize that success as they see fit, leading people back home to Godhead, rather than, as the Bhagavatam says in the opening chapter, rather than simply giving the world a religion of that exploits them for simply sense gratification, whereby we behave in such a way to attain heavenly pleasures, only to find out that that is not permanent. So it's getting later, and if you need to go, Lakshmi, you can. If you need to ask something else, I'll answer one more, you know.
Can I ask one last?
Okay.
It was interesting because you were saying that when they, after the battle, they got cleansed and they go to heaven. But I just had the thought that at the same time they maintain